Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 26 and probably the final part of our reading of Pandora's Genes. There are only about 8 pages left, and we are probably on the final chapter, actually. And this is a trilogy, so it's probably going to end on a cliffhanger. So we're going to probably have to find the other book then. Anyways, so let's go over the copyright information, which is right here. It's copyright 1985 by Kathryn Lance. I have the author's written permission to read this book on my YouTube channel. And so, yeah, with all that being said, we are going to go back and anyways, so in the last chapter, or last part rather, Will was getting ready. Will, Will, sorry, Zach was getting ready for his exile, getting packed and stuff like that. And he had given Will all the information he had on the traders, even writing a map as to where the village was. And Evie really wasn't too happy with that, so she was going to go talk to Zach again to see if she could get him to change his mind. Okay, so the principal sat behind his desk, staring at the discolored rectangular spots on the wall where Zach's portrait had hung until early this evening. When he had pulled it down and thrown it into the fireplace, one of his hands rested. He had thrown it in the fireplace. One of his hands rested on the flank of his pet fox cat. The other was buried in his hair, pressing against the throbbing pain in his head. He knew that he should go to his quarters and prepare for bed, but he also knew that he couldn't sleep. The things that Zach had told him chased one another in his mind. He was certain that Zach had not exaggerated the fanaticism and degree of organization of the traders. And if he were right, for the first time, the principal was beginning to feel a hint of unease that perhaps he would not prevail over the traders after all. It was true that the testing project was succeeding on a small scale, but the world was a big place, and his capital and district were only a small part of it. If he could not instill his own beliefs into this well-organized empire, what hope had the rest of the world? He remembered again the band of traders he had encountered that afternoon, ordinary people like any of his own subjects who found wild Dinas and their personification of the devil easier to accept than teachings about birth control and hygiene. He was aware that there were other enclaves like the garden hidden elsewhere in this vast continent and perhaps around the world. But were there other leaders like him who had grown up knowing the truth? Had other scientists found the secret of transmission of the women's sickness? Once he had hoped that as the district grew and prospered, he would be able to establish communication with other such communities. Someday, perhaps even to build great ships and renew links with the rest of the world. Now he hoped only to hold what he had and find some way of countering the traders and their poisonous doctrines. He felt a sudden intense desire to call Zach in and discuss these matters with him. Then in the next instant his anger arose again, nearly choking him. On the desk the baby foxcat shifted and turned over, emitting a sleepy growl. Perhaps he should reconsider his decision. He knew well his own tendency to act from the anger of the moment without giving sufficient thought to the best plan. Zach's counsel had always calmed and stabilized him, giving him time to reflect. Yet it was Zach's admission of betrayal that had brought him to this anger, more intense than any he had ever known. Still, nearly everything that Evie had said had contained at least a germ of truth. He did not truly want to continue to rule without Zach beside him, and Zach would certainly never again betray him. He had made that clear by returning from the traitor prison, thinking that his return meant certain death. He had confirmed it by accepting the sentence of exile. Of course, Evie had been wrong about the most important thing, that the three of them should marry, for it was clear that Evie and Zach loved each other. A normal triad marriage under the circumstances was out of the question. He knew his own jealousy too well. But why could he not give in to the inevitable? Oh, okay. But why could he not give in to the inevitable and simply give them his blessing? That way, they would both be near, and the three of them could work together on the problem, which he was beginning to realize was beyond his power to solve alone. The question of succession would even be solved. Should he die, there could be no better leader than Zach, who was well known and well liked both among the population and among the principal's men. Likewise, any offspring of Zach's and Evie's would be the natural inheritor of all that he had built. The only thing wrong with this plan was that the principal knew he could not tolerate it, no matter how right it might be. Even the thought of Evie going away with Zach made his stomach turn over. If she stayed, it would be worse, because he would know that she was nearby and that he could not have her. His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. His immediate reaction was alarm. It was well past midnight, and Robin knew better than to disturb him tonight, when he had left instructions not to be called but for the most serious emergency. He rose, taking his sword from the sheath. "Come in," he said. The door pushed open, and a slight figure stood framed in the doorway. He blinked, not believing his eyes. It was Evie. His mind would not work. What was she doing here? First Zach, and now her. He had given strictest orders that he would not see either of them again, under any circumstances. How had she slipped past the guards? "Will, you must listen to me," she said, her plum-colored eyes wide, her face at once vulnerable and determined. "Go away," he said. "Nothing you say will change my mind." He turned his back, aware that the gesture was childish. He heard the door shut and turned back. She had come into the room like a ghost. She was dressed in a pale, cream-colored blouse and skirt in the Southern fashion, and her long hair hung loose around her shoulders. Her hands trembled slightly, and he could see her chest move beneath the soft folds of her clothing as she breathed. She looked directly at him for a moment, then sank into the armchair where she sat yesterday, and smoothed her skirt in front of her. "I've been talking to Zach," she said. "He is as stubborn as you. Both of you know that the most important thing is to continue the work we are doing and to defeat the traitors, and both of you are putting your quarrel first." "It's more than a quarrel," said Will. He felt awkward at a disadvantage. Clearly, Evie was going to have her say unless he had her physically removed from the room. He replaced his sword in its sheath and sighed, then sat behind the desk. "I know what you feel for Zach," he said. "Don't ask me to keep him here. Go with him if you like." "You sound like an angry child trying to hurt others by hurting yourself. Where is Will the principal, the great leader whose mission is to restore civilization? If that were your true concern, you would not be sending Zach away no matter what he had done." He felt so tired and a little ashamed. "What you're asking is impossible," he said. "Evie, go. Go with Zach." She was silent, and she took a deep breath and spoke. "He doesn't want me. He doesn't feel it's right to take you," he said irritably. "He doesn't want me," she repeated with some intensity. "He has never wanted me. Not 5 years ago, not now. He cares about me, yes. He loves me. But as a daughter, that's all I have ever been to him, or ever will be. He has never loved any woman but his wife, who died all those years ago. Did he tell you that? No, but it's true. I suppose I have known it deep down all along. The mistress told me as much when I first came to the garden, but I chose not to listen to her. Evie stretched out her hand to the baby foxcat, which had awakened and was sitting on the edge of the desk, licking its wounded paw. She took the animal and placed it in her lap, where it curled into a ball. She started to speak again, then stopped. May I have a cup of brew? She asked abruptly. Of course, he said, surprised. The things that Evie was saying and her manner were bewildering. Never had she seemed so familiar with him, so sure of herself. It was as if she had been used to counseling him for years. Like Zach, he poured a cup for her and one for himself. She sipped hers, grimacing at the bitterness, and then he remembered again the young girl who he had talked to across the campfire all those years ago. His desire for her began to rise, and he looked away. Evie set the cup down and sighed. When Zach took me from my family, I was a child. He was the first man I had ever known beside my father's. He was kind to me in ways that my father's were never able to be. My feelings for him grew on the trip. I think he sensed them and tried to discourage me, but I was young and alone in the world except for him, and he became everything to me. I think that in time I would have realized that my feelings were just a child's obsession. But then he disappeared, and everything else happened. I saw how you looked at him when you recognized him yesterday. When I walked into your office and saw him there, I thought my heart had stopped. It was like seeing a dream or a ghost come to life, but it was only that, a dream. Don't you understand? Are you denying that you still love him? Of course not. I'll always love him. He was my first love. But Will, my feelings for him were based on a child's fantasy. They weren't the love of a woman for a man. They aren't like the feelings I have for you. Will shut his eyes tightly and took a deep breath. He could feel his anger returning. If all this is true, he said, his eyes still closed, then why did you turn down my proposal? Why have you never, in all your years, told me the truth? At first, it was because I was afraid of you, but then I kept quiet because I wanted to protect Zach. I saw how you are. How unforgiving. I saw what you did to the guard at your camp and to Daniel. I didn't want that to happen to Zach or to his memory. She paused, took another sip of brew, then continued. I turned down your proposal for the same reason, to protect Zach. I've wanted to be near you, close to you, so many times, but I've always been afraid that I would give away the truth. He looked at her face for a hint that she was lying, but her eyes were as open and clear as ever. You're not going with him then? Haven't you heard anything I've said, Will? I want to be with you. He was bewildered. Are you saying that you want to marry me? She nodded. When I proposed a triad marriage, it was because I was frightened of losing either of you. I thought it was the only way I could stay together. We could stay together. I realize now that it wouldn't work, and I realize now, as I realized for the first time yesterday, that I want to be your wife. Alone? Yes. We belong together. And what about Zach? Where does he belong? At your side. Where he always has been. Oh, where he has always been. Where you want him to be. He stood and began to pace. The anger had settled in, and he felt it, like a pressure building in his chest and behind his eyes. He stopped and stood a moment at the far corner of the room, wanting to get away from her, knowing that when he turned, she would be sitting there still. What are you saying? He said in a voice steady. Oh, no, what you are saying, he said in a voice steady, is that you would marry me to preserve the work in the garden and to save Zach? In part, yes, she said, but most of all because I love you, as a woman loves a man. He wanted to believe her, but the anger would not let him. The slow, deep breaths he was taking seemed only to intensify his rage. When he didn't answer, she lowered her eyes and stroked the baby fox cat. Then she picked it up and gently set it on the desk. She rose from the chair and came towards him, her hands open in appeal. Will, I love you. Don't you want me now? He took another deep breath and held it, but it did no good. He was so angry, he was almost dizzy, and he was frightened, too, as the ghost of something he had thought was long buried began to stir in him. Don't do this, he said. Leave me, Evie. Go away now. She didn't answer. Her hands were still stretched out before her. His jealousy and anger filled his heart, his mind, until there was no room for any other thought or consideration. He took her wrists and gripped them tightly till she cried out. Then he took her by the shoulder and began to shake her, hating himself, unable to stop. She twisted and tried to pull away, but he held her tighter. I know how you feel about him, he said. How can I believe you? What are you trying to do to me? I'm trying to show you the truth, she shouted. Stop it, Will. Stop what you're doing and look at me. Look into your own feelings. He continued to shake her. He wanted to throw her across the room, though through the sound of blood pounding in his ears, he heard the high-pitched howl of a distressed fox cat and nearly stumbled as Napoleon bit into his trouser leg and began to pull. Evie suddenly pulled one hand free and struck him across the face. Stop it, she cried. Without a thought, he slapped her once hard, and then suddenly came to himself and let her go. Feeling weak and ashamed, she stumbled, her face paler than before, but she didn't move away from him. He didn't know what to think, what to do. Leave me, Evie, he said. Too much has happened. Too much harm has been done already. Then it's time to stop it. Now, tonight. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and took a deep breath. What about Zach? He feels he has to go to atone for his betrayal, no matter how you feel. For the sake of the future, you mustn't let him do it. He is the only man who truly understands the traitors. Suppose the leaders come into the capital. Who would know them but Zach? Please, even if you send me away, you must keep him here. If I don't, do you still want me? She looked at the floor and hugged her arms around her. He held his breath, waiting for an answer. At last, she looked up, her eyes rimmed with tears. I love you, she said. I think I have for a long time now, for a very long time. You've always stirred something in me, and I've never felt with anyone else. Not even Zach. Not even today. I want you to touch me, but in love, not anger. A part of him wanted to turn away, but another part wanted her more than anything he had wanted in life. All the feelings of the past years welled up in him, the anguish at losing Zach, the hurt and anger at the betrayal, and most of all, his desire for Evie. She reached out her hand and touched him. A pale hint of dawn showed outside the window through smoking fish oil lamps, though smoking fish oil lamps still cast shadows through the room. He opened his eyes and turned to see her lying beside him on the couch. Her eyes were open, and she looked sleepy and peaceful. Her pupils were so wide they almost obscured the startling color of her eyes. He stroked her back, her warm skin smooth under his fingers. Never in his life had he felt so close to another person. He wanted to speak, but didn't know where to begin. She put a finger to his lips and said, Shh, this is the truth, Will, the only truth. He looked at her in wonder. Why weren't you afraid of me? Because I know you love me, because we are meant to be together. What about the garden? Daughters of the garden can marry, you know. I think that Katha will not approve, but I can persuade the other elder women to agree. If it will, in a way, be seen as a triumph for the garden, for us to be united. It will be a formal declaration that our interests are the same. Ah, Evie, he said, it has always been so hard for me to know the right thing to do. How could I ever have ruled without Zach? How could I continue without both of you? He stretched and yawned, then looked at the light beginning to stream through the window. He stroked her shoulder, then sat up and pulled his clothes from the tangled pile at the foot of the couch where Napoleon was sleeping. When he had dressed, he leaned down and kissed her on the forehead, the eyes, the lips. She grasped his hand and smiled. He stood looking at her, scarcely believing that she was here. I think, he said, that if Zach had brought you to me 5 years ago, I would not have seen you as who you are. You, I'm sorry, you would have been just another of the young girls I thought I needed. He squeezed her hand and smiled sheepishly. It appears now that my brother did the right thing after all. Then he turned and, without another word, walked to the corner of the office and through the narrow doorway that led to Zach's room. And that is it. We are done with this book. We have read the entire thing. We have been reading from Pandora's Genes. It is a book by Kathryn Lance. It is also a trilogy. It is the first book of a trilogy, rather, with the second book being Pandora's Children and the third book being Pandora's Promise. And you can find the books for sale still at most of the bigger book retailers. And they've been reprinted several times because they're very, very good books. Anyways, I want to give a special thanks to Kathryn Lance for allowing me to read this book on my YouTube channel. It has been a pleasure and an honor. I can't really put into words how much of an honor it really is, but it really means a lot. Anyways, so yeah, if you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.